In 2016, people believed that Becca Cosmetics was one of those industry giants that could never fall. Until it fell. But why did Becca go down? What went wrong? And was their collaboration with one major influencer the biggest reason for their downfall? We'll talk today about the origin story of Becca Cosmetics, how it started, how it grew, and what made Estee Lauder want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in their vision, and how things quickly turned for the worse. What was going on behind the scenes, and what other stories from our beauty space crossed timelines with this one. It's an absolutely fascinating story that I can't wait to share with you. Welcome to Behind the Controversy, the rise and fall of Becca Cosmetics. And it's starting right now.
Pete?
Hi. This is a great presentation. If you have an influencer that becomes very closely identified with the brand, what do you do when she leaves?
It's a loaded question, Pete.
Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Behind the Controversy. This is where I dive deep into a story in our cosmetic industry from the past and talk about what happened, what was the timeline, what was the story, and how it's impacting our beauty space today, and what lessons we can learn from this story. And today we're focusing on the legendary Becca Cosmetics. Becca Cosmetics became most known for their highlighter formula, their pressed highlighter formula specifically. But that's not how it started. So let's rewind back to the very beginning in 2001. Becca Cosmetics launched in October of 2001 in Perth, Australia. And if you do not know her, allow me to introduce you to Becca. I don't know if she actually went by Becca. Her name in all of the papers is just Rebecca. Rebecca Morris Williams. Rebecca was a professional makeup artist, and she worked on lots of different people. And as she was working on this wide variety of people, she realized that the current makeup industry, specifically in complexion products, was very lacking in shade range. Her arsenal of makeup just wasn't good enough, and that's where the idea of Becca Cosmetics was born. She started working with cosmetic chemists and formulators, trying to figure out how to make complexion products better. Not just for people that were already being served complexion products, but for people that hadn't really been able to find their shade match as easily. But of course, every good makeup startup needs money. So that's where she started working with her very good friend. His name was Steven Shapira, and they worked together to launch Becca. They actually had the idea of it in 1996, and for 5 years, they worked together to try to formulate products that met Rebecca's standards. They couldn't find anybody in Australia, so they actually ended up moving to Germany and having the products manufactured there. They soon realized that developing such a large shade range would take even more money, so they got their first investors, and those investors helped them to launch the very first Becca Cosmetics in Space NK in London. Can you imagine a startup, a brand new company, out of the gate launching in Space NK? That was a huge feat. What's interesting about this story is they weren't actually supposed to start launching in London. They were supposed to start in New York City in Bergdorf Goodman, but that was when September 11th happened and everything shut down in New York, so they ended up moving their plan to London instead of New York. They did eventually launch in New York in Bergdorf Goodman, but that wasn't until 2002. But it wasn't just Rebecca and Steven working on this shade range. They also hired a highly skilled makeup artist. Her name was Elizabeth Reeves, and her job was to make sure that these shade matches were perfect for everyone. And Elizabeth helped Rebecca and Steven to formulate that very first complexion product. In a 2005 article with the blog Beauty Mark, they asked Elizabeth what drew her to product development, and she responded, "I was getting tired of sales assistants showing me the darkest colored foundation for the fairest person. Unless it's magic foundation, I used to say to myself, and changes color, it's not going to work." So that's when I thought, I have really got to be involved here. Quality makeup is something that I've always always been really passionate about. So seeing that Becca's base was in my hometown, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to get involved. I contacted Rebecca Morris-Williams, the founder of Becca, and we met up. We had a great meeting. She asked if I could help her with the development of the darker colors, and that's where it all started. It has been fabulous ever since. And then she continued, such a great story. Rebecca Morris-Williams gave me complete free range to work on developing colors that I felt would serve women of color well. We were able to create colors that didn't exist in other lines, colors that were simply better suited to many complexions. They also, in a different interview, talked to Rebecca about Elizabeth, and this is what she had to say. I don't know how many cosmetic companies have taken cosmetics for women of color that seriously, that they have a woman of color directly involved in product development. I felt I really needed to have someone who knew what they were talking about. Elizabeth Reeves has been instrumental in developing the darker colors with me. And their very first foundation launched in the color gradient of 30 shades. Their first concealer launched in 34 shades. And this is the next thing that made me gain so much respect for Rebecca and Elizabeth and the team at Becca, was that beyond creating these shades, they had a line in the sand with retailers. Unlike some retailers where they make you only carry a certain number of shades, they say, oh, well, these are the shades that are going to be popular, these are the ones we're going to have in store. They were like, no, you either carry the entire range or you don't carry it at all. We'll just take our business elsewhere. And they had that demand. And thinking about that in hindsight, that was a huge risk for a startup brand. But that risk paid off because by 2007, there were celebrities that were raving about this foundation because their makeup artists, these celebrity makeup artists, had started using the Becca products on them. And the celebrities were like, whoa, what is this? And they started wearing them on red carpets. And Becca started making a huge name for themselves in the professional cosmetic industry. Where they had an issue was that they hadn't reached the everyday consumer yet beyond these shout outs within magazines. Steven once shared in an interview that they specifically didn't do advertisements. They had no ad spend. It was all about word of mouth. In that same interview with Beauty Marked, Rebecca told them, folks have said that it's not commercially viable to have such an extensive range of foundation colors sitting on shelves, and I just think that's crazy. There are so many women out there with darker skin. It is just that companies haven't done it, particularly the women of color don't know where to go to get it. So these women are not in the shops being seen. If they did carry cosmetics that worked for them, women of color would most certainly start coming into the shops and start buying. So with no ad spend and only word of mouth through professional makeup artists, through having these shades available in stores, they had an extremely successful first year. They had $3 million in revenue from 2002 to 2003. In March of 2005, they launched their very first standalone Becca flagship store in London, and they had planned to open other stores in New York and Sydney and Melbourne and possibly Perth. They were like maybe in 2006. They also launched Becca in select Myers stores across Australia. But this is where things started to go wrong for the early stages of Becca because they overextended themselves. They had 200 SKUs and planned to have over 300 SKUs by the end of 2005. That is a lot. And by 2008, they had signed a deal with Bacal Technology, which is an Italian company, to distribute an anti-aging skincare line. They just had way too many products. Also during this time period, they launched in Sephora stores. Unfortunately, all of this investment in new products and all of these SKUs, all of these different individual products that were now in stores, they started running out of money and they ended up leaving Sephora stores in 2008. At this point, they started changing their strategy. They started cutting back some of their SKUs and they changed where they were selling. They actually launched in Duane Reade stores in 2010, which is kind of like a Shoppers Drug Mart. Think like, if you're in the US, think kind of like an Ulta sort of, but more drugstore-y. Becca's big problem was that they were very innovative. And when you're so innovative that people don't quite understand what you're doing, it's really hard to grow that company. company. What they had going for them was they had a fantastic product that once people got it in their hands, they really loved it. It was just a matter of getting it in people's hands, and they struggled with that. So this was when in 2011, they hired a man named Robert DeBaker. He was the ex-CEO of Korres. He was seasoned, he knew what he was doing, and they hired him to take Becca to the next level. Robert DeBaker became the president and CEO of Becca, and it was Robert's choices that really led them into the growth of Becca, but also possibly the downfall of it. So about a year after Robert took over as president and CEO, they got a huge investor, Luxury Brand Partners. They bought a majority stake in Becca Cosmetics. Apparently, because Becca really needed the help at the time, they got it at a, quote, bargain price. You may or may not have heard of Luxury Brand Partners, but you've probably heard of at least one of their brands. They currently own R&Co, IGK, In Common, Ella Luz, and One Size Beauty by Patrick Starr. To be clear, not Jeffree Star, Patrick Starr. They are completely different people. Every time I mention Patrick Starr, people are like, don't you mean Jeffree? No, I do not. Totally different people. But anyway, so Luxury Brand Partners invested a huge amount in Becca to help them grow. As part of that, they re-entered Sephora in late 2013, which was the perfect time to re-enter Sephora. But they didn't go super widespread into all the stores. They only started with less than 100 stores, which was probably really, really smart. Robert shared in an interview with Racked, when we got done reinventing the brand, we had fewer than 120 active products. Of the original 350 we inherited, there were only 6 that were still in the brand. They just did a complete and total overhaul of the products. And one of the products that remained from the original line was the Shimmering Skin Perfector liquid highlighter. The Shimmering Skin Perfector pressed version launched in the summer of 2013. One thing that's really cool about doing these behind the controversies is the overlap of the stories. So when I found an article, a very important article by a woman named Cheryl Wishover who had worked for Racked, I was like, I remember that person because she was friends with Brandon Truax from The Ordinary and Deciem. So I was like, oh, crossover. But anyway, Cheryl Wishover actually did an interview with Robert DeBaker back in 2017. I highly recommend reading the entire article. It's going to be linked down below, but basically she wrote the article about how Robert tried to streamline Becca away from mass distribution and getting those 120 products in front of the right eyes. And in that article, Robert says to her that when they launched in Sephora stores, nobody knew who they were. Like they were like a sleeper brand. That at the beginning of the influencer boom in 2015, Becca had a 0.5% brand recognition at Sephora. But that was all about to change. Because it was around this time that they started dipping their toe into social media. They started an Instagram. They started posting pictures of their products. One day they were looking at their sales as a brand does, and they noticed that there was a huge uptick in one particular shade of their highlighter, Opal. And they were like, why are we selling so many of this highlighter shade? Well, there was an influencer who had become very popular named Jaclyn Hill, who had done a monthly favorites video featuring Becca's Opal, and that had spiked sales.
Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing a prom makeup tutorial. This of course is not only for those going to prom, but any girl who wants to look glamorous for a special occasion, night out, Tuesday afternoon, whatever you please.
Just a friendly reminder, my Sigma Beauty Brush Expert Box is back in stock and will be available until Wednesday, April 30th, which is 1 week from today, unless it sells out beforehand. I will list all of the direct links along with a discount code for you guys in my description bar below this video if any of you are interested. Okay, let's get into the tutorial. First thing I'm going to do, as always, then going in with Makeup Geek Corrupt. Any black shadow will do. Makeup Geek has the blackest shadow I've ever personally worked with before. And this is a Makeup Geek brush. I don't know the name or number of it. I will list it down below in my description bar, of course. Then I'm going to go in with Becca Wild Honey Blush. I broke. saddest day ever. And I'm going to just blend this all over the cheek area. This is a bronzy color with a little bit of terracotta in it. So gorgeous. It doesn't have a super shimmer, which I don't want a really intense shimmer. I want my cheeks to be a little bit more matte. And then we are going to go in with a highlight. This is Opal by Becca, one of my all-time favorite highlights ever, and a Sigma tapered highlighting brush just to highlight those cheekbones. This, again, will look absolutely beautiful in pictures. You won't be over shimmery, over dewy. It'll be the perfect amount in photos. Just a little tap of it on the chin, Cupid's bow, and nose, and you're done. So we are going to go in with MAC Creme Brulee. This is a cream sheen, I believe, so it's nice and creamy and on the sheer side. And I'm going to top it off with Color Your Smile Lighted Lip Gloss in the shade Nude. If you guys have not heard of these glosses yet, you need to jump on the bandwagon. They're amazing. They have a mirror on the side of the lip gloss tube, and they light up so you can do your lip gloss in the dark, in public. It is definitely a prom and all night out essential. I love mine.
Robert told Cheryl in the interview, quote, "It was that moment when we said, like other brands were at the time, gee, we really should send some product out to these people who are doing videos because they're going to talk about our product." And that changed the course of Becca Cosmetics forever.
I woke up today feeling like royalty. The sky is dripping gold and wrapping around me.
One thing that's really important to note about the now famous Becca Shimmering Skin Perfector, both the liquid and the pressed version, is that it was never meant to be any kind of standalone process. It was supposed to be part of a 4-step routine. You were supposed to start with a sheer foundation like the Becca Luminous Skin Color, followed by spot concealing with either their stick foundation or their compact concealer. And then you were supposed to put on the fine loose finishing powder. And finally, putting on step 4, which was the highlighter, which was meant to be a subtle highlighter. It wasn't supposed to be that what we know of as the highlighters of 2015 and 2016, the glow to the gods highlighters that you could see from space. I remember all of us saying that that was the thing, is that you wanted to be seen from space, right? That was not what this highlighter was supposed to be. And the thing was, is that the highlighter wasn't even supposed to be on top of foundation. It was actually supposed to be over finishing powder as kind of a final touch, a final little bit of glow. But, you know, influencers are going to influencer and they're going to do what they want, and they applied a lot of it. A whole lot of it. And personally, I think that's part of why this highlighter became so popular, because you would buy like an Ophir highlighter, for example, and it would go on just bright and fast and just really, really intense. But then you would get the Becca highlighter and you could layer it up. You could actually do a softer glow. And if you wanted that from Space Highlight, you could build it up. But some people didn't necessarily want that. So it gave them a little bit of variation and a way to have some options as far as how much people wanted to glow. So like I'm alluding to, the intention wasn't to have a Jaclyn Hill style look with this, but you know, if it's gonna give you sales, it's gonna give you sales. And Jaclyn Hill was bringing in the sales for Becca. Hello, editing Jen. As I was editing, I found this quote that fits perfectly here. It was an interview that Jaclyn did in 2016 with Refinery 29, and she said, "If you really want to send signals to space and confuse NASA, you can put the liquid on and then the pressed highlighter on top. You will be beaming." Of course, she's going to be talking about the highlighter I'm about to mention, but I just thought that was really interesting how she was specifically using the highlighters not in a way that Becca had ever intended, but that was the trend. That was what the influencers were doing, and Jaclyn knew that, and Becca just went along for the ride. But we're not quite there yet. Let's get back into the story. So after Jaclyn posts about Opal and about their blushes, she ends up sitting down with Robert DeBaker and talks about formulating a highlighter together. And what's important to note about this period of time is that this hadn't been done a whole lot. Influencers hadn't really started doing a lot of collaboration collaborations. But Jaclyn Hill had already done one very publicly and was already working on one behind the scenes. There was a track record for Jaclyn already with a company called Gerard Cosmetics. She actually started with them when they were called Color Your Smile. This whole concept of a light up lip gloss with a mirror on the side, I remember seeing it the first time and I was like, wow, that is really, really cool.
So I will tell you what the surprise actually is, and I'm super excited about this, and I have been waiting like on pins and needles to tell you. So without further ado, the little surprise is that I have teamed up with Color Your Smile and created my very own lip gloss. They are the lip glosses that have a little mirror on the side so you can see how you are applying it, and then it has a light right here. So even when you're in the dark, you can see what you're doing. I know, it's fabulous. Color Your Smile, honest to God, has the best lip gloss formula pretty much like I've ever used. Their formula is amazing. It is rich in consistency, luxurious, opaque, creamy, moisturizing, buttery, doesn't dry out the lips. It is absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't have a foul scent. It doesn't leave that white ring around your lips that so many glosses can do. It is just absolutely beautiful. So I was talking to Whitening Lightning about this whole situation of all their glosses because they have some glosses that are blue and purple and black, and then they have these amazing nude, and I'm like, you guys are missing the perfect color of rose in your lip gloss line. And they were like, do you want to create it with us? And I was like, yes I do. So Color Your Smile and I teamed up, had a baby, and I named her Rose Hill because I personally think this is the perfect shade of rose, and then I incorporated my last name. And what doesn't sound more pleasant than a hill of roses?
And Jaclyn completely blew up Gerard Cosmetics. They came out with not only lip glosses, but lipsticks, full collections of Jaclyn's favorites, and she brought Gerard Cosmetics into the forefront of beauty influencer land. Everybody back then was using Gerard Cosmetics. So there's buzzing in these indie brands that influencers can increase sales. Enter Makeup Geek Cosmetics by Marlena Stell. Marlena met Jaclyn at an event. Jen Gerard from Gerard Cosmetics was also there. And at that event, they were talking about maybe doing an eyeshadow palette together. Makeup Geek was extremely popular at the time. People were calling her lower cost eyeshadows dupes for matte cosmetics. They had extremely good ingredients for the price point. From what I've heard from people behind the scenes of that company, the profit margin on those eyeshadows was much lower because Marlena was insistent on getting an amazing formula for as low of cost to the customer as possible. So they got this fantastic reputation for being super high quality, and I believe, in my opinion, that's probably what Jaclyn was attracted to when she agreed to do a collaboration with Makeup Geek. Makeup Geek was also one of the first companies to do affiliate links, so Jaclyn was already making money through Makeup Geek when she agreed to do the collaboration. And they hit it off immediately. They talked about shades, they worked it all out, and when Jaclyn told Marlena that she wanted to open her own cosmetic company, Marlena helped her out as much as possible, hooked her up with contacts, like they were friends. But the big fatal flaw of a friendship when you're basing things on friendship is that they did not sign a contract. At this point, I'm pretty sure that Jaclyn wrapped up her dealings with Gerard Cosmetics. They had a bit of a fallout. There's a bunch of drama surrounding Gerard Cosmetics from back then, and I think that that was kind of the end of Jaclyn's relationship with Gerard Cosmetics. That is a story for another day of that whole fallout. So for the next 7 months or so, Marlena and Jaclyn are going back and forth about shades for this eyeshadow palette. At the exact same time, Jaclyn is working with Becca Cosmetics for a highlighter collaboration. In May of 2015, the shades have been picked and finalized with Makeup Geek, and Makeup Geek puts the order in for the shadows for a launch soon of the eyeshadow palette. Why I'm saying launch soon is that because Jaclyn and Marlena were friends, Marlena trusted that Jaclyn would follow through with the collaboration when she ordered $1 million worth of product between the eyeshadow pans and the components they were going in, all of the packaging and everything. Marlena ordered everything on the promise that this would go through. But what Marlena didn't know was at that exact same time, Jaclyn signed another contract with Morphe Cosmetics for this eyeshadow palette, which would go down in history as one of the best-selling eyeshadow palettes of all time. But we'll talk about this guy more later. We're not going to talk about why it's dirty. It's because it's well used. But this palette right here. At this time, I can't even imagine what it was like to be Jaclyn Hill trying to take advantage of this moment. She has now currently 3 collaborations she's working on. Plus, she's creating a ton of content. She's growing her channel. She's going places and doing meetups, and it's just, it must have been such a whirlwind. In July of 2015, Champagne Pop launches, and this is what puts Becca Cosmetics on the map.
So now for the highlight. I'm going to be using Champagne Pop. This is the highlight that I created with Becca Cosmetics. I'm so excited about this, oh my God. I've talked about this so much on Twitter and Snapchat. This is my first time actually using it on camera. I don't know if I'm technically supposed to be talking about this yet, but I will go in depth in the next video and show you like the packaging and the actual color and all of that. But I'm just gonna use it today because I'm so excited. And it's what I've been using for so long. This is like the only highlight pretty much that I have been using for like the past 3 months. I'm not kidding. Oh my God, I'm so excited to swatch this on camera for the first time. I like have goosebumps. Stop it! Using the, I'm like shaking. Oh my God, I'm using the Morphe M501 brush. Ah! Okay. Okay. Just keep going, just keep going. You just be strong, Jaclyn. You can do this. Just be strong. The highlight is too strong. It's too on fleek. I can't take it. Highlight is too on fleek. I feel like there should be like a red alert. It's like, fleek overload. I hope that you guys enjoy this. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for everything, you guys. Seriously, I don't say it enough, I probably think, but I love you very much, and I'm very grateful. Those of you know exactly who you are. I'm not talking to the haters or the bypassers. I'm talking to like my true Hillsters, my ride or dies, my girls and my boys who've been here with me. I love you so much, and I'm so thankful for you. So I hope that you guys enjoy, and I'll see you soon.
In the first 20 minutes on Sephora.com, it was reported that they sold 25,000 units. And in the first 4 days, sources like WWD reported that the highlighter generated $4 million in sales. Hashtag Champagne Pop trended on Twitter for 3 days and ranked number 10 in trending items. I try to remember during this part of the story that this had never happened before. Brands weren't even necessarily putting celebrities' names on products that often, but to put an influencer who just films in her bedroom on a product was a huge risk, but it paid off. And it was a signal to the entire rest of the industry that influencers and their ability to sell things was something to watch out for. Just in case you're relatively new to the beauty space, I want to take just a second and swatch Champagne Pop for you, just so you know what this was like. It is very soft, and it was famous for being universal on every skin tone, just looking absolutely gorgeous. So that is a full just swatch on the hand, and I'm going to blend it in so you can see how light that highlight was just by itself. Another thing I want to mention specifically about Champagne Pop was that they had said at the launch of this highlighter that it was going to be limited edition, that this was the time that you were going to be able to get it, and if you didn't get it now, you weren't going to be able to get it. But I don't think Becca knew that this was going to happen. I don't think they had any way of knowing how popular this highlighter was going to be and the demand that customers were going to have to bring this highlighter back. So that's what they did that holiday season. In October, they launched a 3-pan Champagne Glow holiday palette that had Champagne Pop and 2 other shades. Now, I can only imagine what it must have been like for Marlena at Makeup Geek, knowing that she was about to have the exact same experience. Marlena was able to send Jaclyn photos of her final outer packaging. The following month, the eyeshadow shades started arriving to Marlena's warehouse. They were getting everything together, but because they hadn't signed a contract, there was no launch date that had been agreed to. While all this is happening, the Makeup Geek collaboration is sitting in the warehouse, and eventually there's talks between Jaclyn's mom, who was managing her business at the time, and Marlena's team about, let's nail down a date. When are we going to launch? Eventually, Jaclyn's mom agrees that the Makeup Geek palette will launch in April of 2016. 2016. But Jaclyn's conflicted. At least this is the way it plays out in my mind of what happened, because they have planned to do this palette. This is the famous face palette that she had launched with Becca Cosmetics. And I don't know when it happened, but later on, after the initial idea of this, they decided they were also going to launch an eyeshadow palette. But she had already planned to do an eyeshadow palette with Makeup Geek. So now they're supposed to be launching right around the same time an eyeshadow palette with Becca, an eyeshadow palette with Makeup Geek, and then she has an eyeshadow palette planned with Morphe. So this is going to overload her audience with eyeshadow palettes. And Jaclyn has to make a choice. Is she going to go with a Becca eyeshadow palette, or is she going to go with a Makeup Geek eyeshadow palette? And she decides to renege on her verbal agreement with Makeup Geek and go with Becca. Jaclyn formally emails Marlena and tells her that the collaboration isn't going to happen and that she hopes that she can sell the shades as individuals. Marlena in the end loses about $1 million from the products that she cannot sell. Because though Makeup Geek was doing very, very well, she had over-ordered due to Jaclyn's influence, and there was no way that she could sell this many eyeshadows without Jaclyn's selling power, and she knew it. So what happened to the eyeshadow palette that she launched with Becca? Well, that was a whole debacle in itself. The face palette went off without a hitch, other than that people were still complaining. Like, wasn't this supposed to be limited edition? We were only supposed to get it in this limited run in these singles, and now we've got the holiday palette that came out, and now we've got another palette that came out. Like, what is happening? I do not have the eyeshadow palette that went along with the face palette, and there's a reason why. It's because it never officially hit stores. It only went out to influencers and the people that got it on pre-order, because there was a big problem with it. As influencers and fans who got it on pre-order started playing with it, they saw something wrong with it, that it was powdery, that it wasn't applying like a typical Becca product. There was something that was off about it. The next thing that the public knew was that Becca was pulling the eyeshadow palette and was not going to be releasing it to the masses. Jaclyn went to her Snapchat and explained why. Now, this footage from Jaclyn's Snapchat is awful. It is the worst quality, but it is the only footage that I know of that exists of this Snapchat. So I'm going to play it for you, and I want to play it in full because I think that it's so interesting for perspective what Jaclyn's mindset was at the time and why Becca had to pull this eyeshadow palette.
Straight to the point, because I want to address something that I am so stressed about, and I'm so happy just to be here and finally talk to you guys about this. I have been seeing all the comments, not all of them of course, but I've been seeing comments and the negative reviews about the Champagne Collection eyeshadow palette, and I want to talk about that. First off, I just want to say that I completely agree with you guys. The reason I have not been responding is because me and Becca have been in communication trying to figure out what to do about this. The eyeshadow palette is getting a ton of negative reviews saying that it's dry, it's patchy, it's not Becca's original beautiful formula that everyone loves so much, and I completely agree with you guys. So I'm going to start from the beginning and give you a little story to bring you up to speed so that you know exactly what happened, so that you don't have any questions or you're not confused in any way. So when Becca and I, had the conversation of the summer of 2016 Champagne Collection, I immediately was all about the face palette. That was my baby, my heart and soul. I've been so hands-on with that palette. I take so much pride in that palette. Now, keep in mind that I don't get to touch formulas because it's half Jaclyn, half Becca, but I get to do shades. Becca came to me and said, we want to do an eyeshadow palette. And I said, no, we can't. I have so much going on. I'm working so hard on this collaboration as it is with the face palette. I have so much going on in my personal life. And they were like, no. What we want to do is we want to create an eyeshadow palette, Becca formulas, Becca colors, and we just want you to create one shade that represents Champagne Pop. I was like, okay, yes, love it, die. Sounds like such a great plan, and that's what I've told you guys already, is how it's Becca's palette, Becca's formulations, but I got to create Champagne Toast. I was assured that it was going to be the same formula as all of their other palettes. You guys know I love their Ombre Rouge palette. If you look at the reviews, their palettes have amazing reviews. Everyone loves them. So I was totally down. Of course, great shadow palette. You guys create it. I'll create the actual shade of Champagne Toast. Let's do it. So that's how that palette went down. Because there was a time crunch and they had to launch this palette with the whole collection, everything we were working on had to come out at the same time, right? So they sent this palette to a different lab. They were told that this lab could produce the same exact, you know, beautiful, creamy, high pigmented shades and shadows that they were always used to, so they trusted that. I was not aware of the situation because I was not as hands-on with this palette. I was just responsible for the shade of Champagne Toast, but I was just told that it was going to be Becca formulas, and that's that. That doesn't matter. Becca's an amazing brand. They know what they're doing. They've used several labs in the past, and they were told this one was going to be amazing. They trusted it, and now here we are. Oh, the point that I'm getting at is some people have been loving this palette. I've seen a lot of great reviews. I've seen a lot of people tag me in beautiful photos of their eye makeup saying that they love this palette so much. There's also a ton of bad feedback. And I don't even want to say it's like negativity or hate because it's just people saying, calling out the obvious. These aren't Becca shadows. They're dry, they're patchy, they're different. What's going on? And I'm just here to let you know exactly what's going on. Becca is a great company with great intentions. They did not try to do anybody dirty. They didn't try to hurt me or hurt you. But this is now where we are at, and I now have my name on an eyeshadow palette that I do not believe in. And I have promised you guys many, many, many times that I would never put my name on something that I don't believe in. I was told it was going to be just the regular formulas. It wasn't. So because of that, we are going to be eliminating the Champagne Collection eyeshadow palette altogether. Now, Becca did not have to do this because of the fact that this technically isn't my palette, it's theirs. Because, like I've said a million times, this technically is not my palette. It's Becca's palette, and I was just responsible for one color out of the 5. So they really didn't have to respect my wishes. But they see my frustration. They see my subscribers' frustration. And I promised you guys that I would never put my name on something that isn't amazing, and this palette is not what I thought it was going to be. So therefore, it is no longer going to be available on June 16th when it goes into stores. The eyeshadow palette will not be available. The face palette will be, and Champagne Pop Liquid. Becca feels absolutely terrible and just heartbroken by this entire situation because they thought that these were going to be absolutely amazing, and the deadline hit so quick. All of a sudden, it was just like, oh, boom, the eyeshadow palette is launched. Oh, boom, why are they different? Oh, boom, look at all this negativity. And it was just like, it's just been a bad situation. But Becca and Sephora are doing their absolute best to try to make this into a good situation. They have promised that anyone who is dissatisfied with this palette can get a full refund, no problem. They told me that they are planning ways of making this up to you guys because they feel so sorry because your trust in their eyeshadow and their product means the world to them, obviously. And as far as me and my relationship with my subscribers go, I hope you know and I hope this proves to you that you are always my number one. Not money, not makeup, you. I'm sure I could have made money off of this palette, you know, good money, I'm sure, but I could care less. I would pay someone to take this palette away. We hear you guys. I'm so thankful for you guys stepping up and being so honest. You guys are always honest with me, and I'm honest with you, and you have no idea how thankful I am for that. And honestly, I continue to be impressed by Becca as a company and the fact that they are eliminating this palette. They could have just said, like, Jaclyn, screw you, we're keeping this, you're only responsible for one shade, we're gonna make money. But instead, they listen to me and they listen to you guys. You guys are the ones that they really listen to. Like I say it all the time, like I'm nobody without you guys. Like, it's amazing. There's honestly, you guys, not that many brands out there and just not many people in business in general that would do the right thing. And the fact that Becca sees this and is trying to fix it is amazing. And I just hope that you guys know that my loyalty is always to you. I'm not trying to knock anybody. Becca knows I love them and I'm so grateful and honored by this collaboration, but at the same time, they also know my loyalty is to you. You're my number one and you truly only deserve the best. That's why this palette will no longer be available. If you aren't happy with it, please go get a refund, girl. Please. Becca is learning their lessons just like I am, just like we all are every day of our lives. There's always a lesson to be learned. They will never do this again. This will never happen for us or them again.
A YouTuber named Elle made a fantastic 2-part series on the downfall of Becca, and she makes some really interesting points and says some fascinating things. And I want to make sure she gets full credit for this information because the way she put it together was absolutely brilliant. The 2 videos will be linked down below if you'd like to watch them in full, but I do want to play you just a quick clip of Elle's video.
This palette was larger and had 5 shades. 2 highlighters and 3 blushes, including a brand new highlighter called Prosecco Pop. The details of their partnership aren't public, but it's likely that the contract Becca and Jaclyn had was extended to release more products due to the success. This was also a partnership that involved Sephora, as the products were exclusive to the retailer. Champagne Pop was also trademarked by Becca in 2016. And this collection was the largest. The previously mentioned face palette, liquid and poured versions of Champagne Pop, which were also to be a permanent part of the Becca collection, and an eyeshadow palette. But the Champagne Pop collection hit a snag. To cut corners, Becca had eyeshadow palettes produced in China. Normally their eyeshadow will be produced in America, but a lab in China was selected allegedly at the last minute to try and produce more palettes in a shorter amount of time, and likely for less money. This caused poor quality issues. This issue exploded within the beauty community, but people who had received the collection in PR first gave mostly positive reviews. It took a small YouTuber who at the time went by Rita B to speak out against big names. Rita was the one who pointed out the manufacturing differences and how the formulas matched those of Essence and Catrice. Suddenly, more and more negative reviews came out. These eyeshadows truly were disappointing, and now people felt comfortable speaking out. She made it clear that she was only responsible for one of the shades in the eyeshadow palette. Jaclyn insisted throughout her collab that she was in no way responsible for formula, ingredients, or manufacturing. A YouTube video Jaclyn had made about the collection was taken down, with no way to verify what had been said in that video versus the speculation in the Snapchats. Until now, I have the deleted video.
I want to say right here now, a lot of people will kind of doubt collaborations and think, oh, but you didn't do any work. They came up with everything and you just slapped your name on it. I just want to say right now, that is not how this went down. And anyone from Becca will tell you that that is not how this went down.
So in the video, the face palette and eyeshadow palette were specified as being limited edition, not the shades within them.
This is a limited edition face palette, and no, unlike Champagne Pop, this is never going to become permanent. It is limited and it's going to stay limited.
While Jaclyn was only responsible for creating one shade from scratch, Champagne Toast, she did have a say in the other shades and approval. For example,
Cognac right here, I requested, please make sure that there is a beautiful matte, warm, medium tone brown, because you know how much I need this color in my life.
So Jaclyn did have more to do with the eyeshadow palette than she had insisted on. And of course, nowhere in the video did she say she didn't want to do it, or that she was unhappy with the quality. She also discussed the eyeshadow palette as if she had experience using it, more than once. What happened with quality control? Either these palettes were never checked, or the hope was that they could get away with subpar formulations. Becca opted to pull the palette from the launch entirely, and customers who had purchased early during the pre-launch were advised that they could return the eyeshadow palette if they wanted.
On June 8th of 2016, Becca released this information via an Instagram post. They said, "We apologize to our fans, to Jaclyn's fans, and to Jaclyn Hill, whom we love and respect so much. We remain committed to the highest standards of excellence, and we are very sorry in this case that we've let you down." Because Jaclyn put Becca Cosmetics on blast through that Snapchat. Even though I feel like she tried to be soft about it, it made Becca look really, really bad. And Jaclyn's fans were really upset on her behalf. And remember, a lot of the new Becca customers were also Jaclyn Hill fans. So pissing them off was a really bad business move. That's why I think they kind of bowed down to Jaclyn in that moment and so severely apologized. But the rest of the collection did launch on June 16th of 2016, and reports say it yielded $3.5 million in sales just within the first 5 hours of the premiere on Sephora's website. Absolutely wild. Becca Cosmetics was doing better than they ever had, and it was all due to Jaclyn Hill and Champagne Pop, and then the other shades that she had launched within this palette. This is really important to the story. So also within this palette were Rose Spritz, Amaretto, Pamplemousse, and Prosecco Pop. Prosecco Pop's gonna be drama in just a minute. At that point, I don't know how many people believed that Champagne Pop was still going to be limited edition, or how many people have been like, they're never gonna stop selling this thing. But some people were really upset when they released another product. with champagne pop in it. These were split pans. So it was half blush, half champagne pop, or half blush, half Prosecco pop. And these were released in the summer of 2016. And not only were people excited about the products that they had learned about through Jaclyn Hill, but they were also buying products in the rest of the Becca line. And Becca just off into the stratosphere in popularity for so many of their products. And it was in that they got the attention of Estee Lauder, and they were acquired by Estee Lauder in October of 2016. They signed an agreement to buy Becca for about $230 million. That year, Becca's sales were forecasted to reach $80 million for the year. In November of 2016, they actually relaunched this palette. It was just supposed to be limited release, but again, they relaunched it, and that was just kind of irritating some people. It's like, say what you mean. Like, it wasn't necessarily that it kept coming back, but it was like, if it's gonna be limited edition, let it be limited edition, let it die. But don't then go back on that. It started making people lose a bit of trust in the brand, but because of their love for Jaclyn Hill and their love for the performance of some of the products, people still had brand loyalty. At the time, Drama Channel Here for the Tea did a video about this, and she clocked that the re-release of this palette was just days after they had asked their fans on Twitter if they wanted the palette to come back, which of course is a ridiculous timeline. They were bringing it back regardless of whether fans had voted or not. Another important thing happened right around that time. As soon as Becca sold to Estee Lauder, Rebecca herself left the company. Some sources say that she stayed on as a creative director, but she stepped out of her more managerial roles. Investors estimated that Rebecca herself got about $40 million Australian or $26.4 million USD, but I couldn't find, not 100% sure if those numbers are accurate. Back then, she did an interview with a publication called West Business Insider in Australia, and she said, "My hope was that if Becca was to become successful, that it would be noticed by Estee Lauder. I was inspired by brands such as Bobbi Brown, MAC, and Stila, and believed that by creating high-quality products fueled by my own distinctive aesthetic that I could perhaps follow in their footsteps." But this is when things started to take a bit of a turn. Becca was about to learn a hard lesson on influencer marketing, because we know now that when you work with an influencer, the reputation of that influencer, what that influencer says about your brand, can really influence how your brand is perceived in the public. Becca already knew they were playing with fire continuing to work with Jaclyn Hill because of what had happened with the eyeshadow palette. I can only imagine how much money they lost not launching that eyeshadow palette, in the way that Jaclyn went on Snapchat and basically threw them under the bus in the nicest way possible. Jaclyn fans and Becca fans were linked. So if Jaclyn, for whatever reason, was unhappy with Becca, that would significantly affect sales. And Becca was about to piss Jaclyn off.
Nothing's gonna bring me down. I'm feeling so divine. Life can be so wonderful.
On January 18th of 2017, Trendmood, which is an account run by a woman named Sophie, and she has done for many, many, many years makeup industry sneak peeks. She does skincare, she does fragrance, all of that. She still posts. So Trendmood had posted this photo showing that Prosecco Pop was going to be relaunched. Not only was it going to be relaunched in the pressed version that was in this face palette, but it was also launching in their other two formulas, the liquid and the poured. Why was this a big deal? Because apparently Jaclyn didn't know about it, and this had been a highlighter that she had designed. When Trendmood posted about this, people were tagging Jaclyn, and she responded, "Wow, this is news to me. Is this for real at Becca Cosmetics?" That led to an onslaught of negative comments against Becca in defense of Jaclyn, that they were daring to release this highlighter without her, without talking to her, when she was the one who had designed the shade, allegedly. Fantastic headline in Teen Vogue from the time, published on January 26th of 2017. Jaclyn Hill and Becca Cosmetics are reportedly feuding, and the subheading is just, "Uh-oh." "Uh-oh" was absolutely Right. If Jaclyn Hill fans are anything, they are loyal. And I feel like they were even more loyal back then. And just a whisper of anybody doing anything to hurt Jaclyn would hurt that other thing. Jaclyn fans go for the jugular. And things did not get better from there for Becca. In May of 2017, they did a collaboration with Chrissy Teigen. And people were comparing the Chrissy Teigen palette with Jaclyn's palette, saying that it was a copy, which further pissed people off. And it further reinforced people's opinions that people over at Becca were dishonest, that they had said that Champagne Pop was going to be limited edition, and then they brought it back numerous times and then eventually made it permanent. That they were releasing this eyeshadow palette with Jaclyn, and that they had used a lab that they were not supposed to use, and that it was all their fault. And that now they have released Prosecco Pop and not told Jaclyn. People started side-eyeing Becca as being a shady company. When you put all that stuff side by side, like in 2025 lens, it doesn't feel like that stuff's that deep, right? Are you feeling that? Like, why do people even care about this stuff? Why is that? Back then, this was that deep. It was a big deal. Like, this was big drama about these shades. Now we have bigger fish to fry. But back then, this was a huge deal. But through all of this, Becca pushed on, and they tried to go back to their roots of the complexion products, of highlighting their extensive shade range. In June of 2017, Robert DeBaker told Racked that their customer base was extremely diverse due to their shade range, that 55% of their customers identified as non-white, and they tried really hard to focus on that in their marketing and in their social media, and they tried to pull away from their association with Jaclyn Hill. And yes, there were other cosmetic companies making huge shade ranges back then, but it was not the norm. The Tarte Shape Tape Foundation debacle was going to happen a year after this. And if you don't know that story, I have a full behind the controversy on that. But what I'm saying is that the makeup industry as a whole hadn't embraced that a large shade range in a gradient was needed, but this is something that Becca was providing, and they were trying to get that word out there, but they were more seen as the makeup company that Jaclyn Hill used, and they were having trouble getting that out to the masses and have that be their persona rather than being associated just with Jaclyn Hill and a highlighter. They did one more collaboration with Jaclyn in June of 2017. It was the Champagne Pop 2-year anniversary highlighter. But this relationship was pretty much over because Jaclyn found a new company to be her favorite, and that was Morphe. She announced just a few days after the Champagne Pop anniversary highlighter launch that she was launching the white palette with Morphe. This launched on June 21st of 2017 to ridiculous sales. This became the most popular eyeshadow palette in our entire community. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was trying it. I ended up, like, you can see how messy this is. I used the heck out of this palette because it was a different formula, and I had done a whole ingredient analysis back then. It was a different formula than what Morphe had been releasing, and it was so good. So people absolutely lost their minds over this palette. And it was at that point that Jaclyn officially moved on. Let's fast forward a year later to when Jaclyn announced that she had another collaboration with Morphe coming out called The Vault. And it was a collection of smaller eyeshadow palettes in different color stories. The Vault collection dropped June 26th, 2018, but there was a problem. And the problem was that the design for The Vault looked oddly similar to the design that Jaclyn had launched with Becca. Becca sent a cease and desist to Morphe for the Vault collection, saying that they copied the design that Jaclyn had used for the Becca collaboration. That cease and desist was sent July 17th of 2018, and by August 2nd, Morphe had filed a countersuit against Becca to get them to leave them alone. This carried on for a while and eventually it was dismissed. This, I'm sure, definitely sealed the deal of the end of the relationship between Becca and Jaclyn Hill. But if you were around during that time, or if you've heard this story before, you know that the vault had issues very similar to the issues that Jaclyn had with the Becca eyeshadow palette. That the vault formula, the eyeshadow palettes that people were trying, people were saying they just weren't good, that they weren't the same formula as this eyeshadow palette because it wasn't the same formula. It was more similar to the traditional Morphe formula, but Jaclyn didn't tell people that.
So a year ago, Morphe and I released this palette right here called the Jaclyn Hill palette. And as you guys know, because I made it very clear because it was such a long process, this took us a little over 2 years to develop. And I told you guys several times when talking about this palette that while we were creating and developing those shadows, I actually came up with about around, give or take, 100 different shades for this palette. And because it is only a 35 color palette, and we knew from the very beginning that we were gonna keep it 35 colors, I had to narrow that down to this right here. So, the collection that I am now launching with Morphe 1 year later are all of the other shadows that were kept in the vault. So this right here is 40 additional eyeshadows. It is the same formulation, pressed the same way, same pigmentation as the Jaclyn Hill palette, which we all know and hopefully we all love. It's just so exciting because as you guys know, my formula is not the same as the Morphe standard eyeshadow formula. Linda was so kind to allow me to develop my own formula with them and have it pressed in my own unique way so that it goes on completely differently than their other eyeshadows. So it's super exciting that these are the exact same formula as this palette right here. I have wanted to do this for quite some time, and I know it's almost like a trend right now in the beauty community to sit down and like tell your truth or just share your thoughts and opinions. This might be similar to that, but more than anything, I just have some things that I really need to address. First thing that I want to address is my vault collection with Morphe. So I'm just going to start off by saying that there have been inconsistencies in the production. So the first thing is people are getting palettes that are not having good pigmentation and not swatching well. First of all, let me just say that this news broke my heart. It does not matter what I feel. What matters is you guys are spending your money on a palette and it should be exactly what I say, what Morphe says. It should be what we promise. And I just want to put it out there right now. Don't you ever think for 1 second that I have been blowing this off, not paying attention, or me and Morphe are just like, laughing our way to the bank about this. Like, this has been a major stress ever since the second I got the first negative review. The first time that I saw someone say like, oh, mine is patchy, I was like, like, I'm just gonna be real. I was like, okay, like, there's being a hater because these are bomb, right? I'm gonna take my emotions out of this and how I feel because, like I said, not important. So basically, we pushed back the launch date. We saw all over social media, beauty influencers were giving it negative reviews. Some people were giving it positive reviews, some were giving it negative. Overall, not good. We went in, we swatched hundreds, and we found inconsistencies, pretty major inconsistencies. So we were like, what do we do, right? So Linda came to me and told me, like, I am choosing to push back the launch. She came to me and was like, there's inconsistencies. I swatched them with my team. I've been watching the reviews for the past 24 hours. It's bad. We're pushing it back. Of course, we cried. It was this whole thing. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is going to be a huge scandal. Like, I'm disappointing people. Once again, like, here Jaclyn Hill goes, like, putting something out that is just going to cause, like, an uproar. And I'm already under a microscope for everything I do. Like, I'm going to disappoint my subscribers. I'm going to make them think that I'm not trustworthy. And, like, I was just, like, so sad that I was doing that to you guys. But also thankful, very thankful that they were willing to push it back. Pushing back the launch cost them millions of dollars, and it was a very big hit for Morphe. So that was like, they really showed and they proved to me like who they are as a brand, and I thought that was really cool.
So that when that formula came out, people were pissed and they ended up recalling the vault and re-releasing it. Now, there was a whole bunch of drama. I know this isn't a Morphe video, but there was a whole bunch of drama regarding the re-release of the vaults, that it didn't take very long for them to re-release them. And people suspected that they never reformulated the eyeshadow palettes at all, that they just said that they reformulated and then just re-released the exact same palettes palettes again. But that's drama for another day, but that was a complete mess. But I can see why they did that, because Jaclyn had promised with the Becca debacle that she would hold companies to a higher standard, that when she did a collaboration, it better come out to the spec of what her audience expected, or else she would recall it. She'd already done that. So when the Vault came out and it had the same issues, I'm assuming she felt like she had to follow the same patterns. According to Morphe's lawsuit, it read, more than 6 weeks after the new Morphe and Jaclyn Hill eyeshadow palettes and their packaging were revealed, and less than 3 weeks before the long-anticipated product launch, Becca sent Morphe a cease and desist letter claiming for the first time to have common law trade dress rights in the design of the product packaging for its Champagne Pop palette. The packaging design at issue consisted of the white outer box with Miss Hill's signature in the center of the package as part of the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill logo against a silver background that explodes from the center into confetti-like particles flecked with colored accent shapes that correspond to the 40 eyeshadow shades within the collection. The issue was that apparently the collaborations were overlapping, and she was still under contract with Becca when they used that design for the Vault. The cease and desist letter said that the right constitutes false designation of origin, palming off, and trade dress infringement, as well as tortious interference with an existing agreement. But Morphe's lawsuit was like, no, absolutely not. We did this with her. It has nothing to do with you. Their lawsuit says Becca claims to have developed its purported trade dress rights through extensive use, such that consumers associate that packaging and products on which it is used exclusively with Becca. In reality, Becca only offered the product bearing the alleged protected trade dress design through 2 limited edition product runs in 2016. Like, basically, that's the way I'm interpreting it, is that you use it for like one thing, and now you're saying you own it forever, but you don't. It's just associated with this one little drop, but it's not associated with your brand. Also in the lawsuit, Morphe pointed out a bunch of different cosmetic brands that used similar packaging designs, saying that Becca just didn't have rights to it. The lawsuit continued. Becca does not own any trade dress rights in the design of the Champagne Pop palette, much less trade dress rights with priority over those of Morphe, and that if any rights do exist, Morphe has not infringed those rights. Despite all of this, Robert DeBaker told Racked that there was no drama between Becca and Jaclyn Hill. He said that they had a phenomenal partnership and that any rumors that they were feuding was quote unquote classic fake news. He also called it, in that interview with Cheryl Wishover, beauty world drama, comparing the situation to something you would see on TMZ. He said, we have nothing but love and admiration for Jaclyn, and I truly believe it's the same for her toward us. We have had a phenomenal partnership, and in many ways, we set the bar together on what a collaboration between a beauty influencer and a brand should look like. Having ended the collaboration with Jaclyn, they did officially make both Champagne Pop and Prosecco Pop permanent, but from my understanding, Jaclyn was detached from those products at that point. And Becca they tried to recreate the magic with other celebrities, and it just didn't work. It didn't matter who they collaborated with. Nothing met the expectation of what Jaclyn had been able to do. Nothing was able to do the same thing. They had collaborated, like I mentioned a minute ago, Chrissy Teigen a couple of times. They also collaborated with best friends Khloe Kardashian and Malika Hack. And then eventually Barbie Ferreira, who was on Euphoria, ended up being the face of the brand. Nothing compared to what Jaclyn had done for Becca. In my research, I found a fascinating talk by Robert DeBaker. It was done at the WWD Digital Beauty Forum, and his talk was called The Influencer Evolution. I will put the entire video down below. But in that, he's talking about relationships with influencers and selling products. And I thought it was just, let me just play you a couple of clips.
Sort of an interesting moment. You know, there's the thought of where we go next with influencers and what's really happening with them. As I contemplated that the most, one of the things that dawned on me was we could all stand here. If I had a whiteboard and I said, throw out the names, you all make a list, and then tell me what you came up with the list as the top 10, top 15 big-time beauty influencers. I would be surprised if our lists varied by more than 1 or 2 people. Because the truth is, the people who were huge 15, 18 months ago are huge right now. Has anyone new emerged? I don't think so. If anyone has emerged, it's not more than 5. Of the big names that we know we would count on that can move the mark when it comes to influencer consumer engagement that can really drive sales. I think that's very telling. I think that what that tells us is the opportunity to grow to be 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million followers and create some kind of traction and create influence to move the mark on sales has changed to the point where those that are there are going to be there. And it's why I think we all sort of organically moved to this idea of micro-influencers, those people who had 100,000, 200,000 followers, and so on. I think the most important point about that movement, number one, it's interesting to contemplate all the reasons why we're not seeing a surge in big number followers, influencers. I think that layer of what we call micro-influencers, we're all in love with, and so are consumers, because there's a certain authenticity. They haven't been yet paid a lot of money. They haven't yet been given a ton of product. It's still genuine. It's still authentic. I believe we're also in a moment of time where, as in the beauty industry in particular, I happen to live in a household where I have a really interesting dynamic. I have a very beauty-savvy, well-informed, great makeup artist, professional woman for a wife, with a 15-year-old who's incredibly detail-oriented about her own makeup and super involved in the influencer world. In that dynamic 15 years ago, my wife would be teaching my daughter how to do makeup and what her skincare should look like. It's totally the other way around. If I come home with a new product from Becca and my 15-year-old daughter said, I don't really like that, my wife won't wear it. The influence, and that's not just my household. I'm sure any of you have teenage daughters can agree, the influence movement is changing, where the influence is coming up. A younger audience, a younger consumer is so knowledgeable about what's going on with product in our category because she's engrossed in the videos. She's engrossed in the content. She follows so many different people. She has more time to do it than those of us who have to work for a living, but she also has a ton of content available to her, and she's not watching television anymore. She's not even looking at Netflix as much. She's looking at her device, and she's paying attention to those videos, and she's learning so much more. But what that consumer is telling us through everything that she learns and everything that she's doing is authenticity is important to her. Genuine trust is important to her. It's way more valuable. Right now, I know there's going to be a lot of talk today about the words authenticity and things that are related to the digital moment. That word, to me, has become overused, but it couldn't ever, to me, has never also been more important. And how you define that for your brand and how you identify how you're going to match together, which influencers you choose to work with, how you choose to have them come to life. You can't control what they say. We all can look at brands that have gone through tough moments with things that have happened in recent times and see influencers that they paid money to, that they invited to events, who advocated on their behalf, turned around and spoke against those brands and the issues they've just recently dealt with. So, but that's real and that's authentic. But where's the line? We paid them, but they have to remain authentic. We paid them to advocate on behalf of our brand, but they have to make sure their followers see them as genuine. We're creating a very tough moment, and we're all living in the midst of these influencers who've been paid who have to maintain authenticity. And it's a tougher game for them, but I think the challenge is on us as brands, because ultimately the consumer will not make the judgment call on the influencer. They're going to make the judgment call on the brand. This Gen Z consumer is immediately believing what they read and what they see in these posts or in the videos. It's no different than when we learned to read the newspaper or read different things, and we'd say, if I read it, it must be true. This age group is, if I saw it in a video or I saw it in a post, it must be true. The difference is the quick disconnect when someone goes off the reservation with bad ideas or is inauthentic or lies or says something and then it's found out that that person was paid to say it. There is a quick and immediate disconnect from that influencer, from that moment. This audience is so willing to believe, but is just as quick to dismiss, which makes authenticity a premium. So as the influencer moment evolves, I think what we need to be paying attention to is how this native to the influencer movement consumer is advocating with what they do with the influencers. Happy to take your questions. Pete?
It was a great presentation.
Thank you, Pete.
If you have an influencer that becomes very closely identified with the brand, what do you do when she leaves?
It's a loaded question, Pete. I think that what you do when she leaves is you better be sure. To me, the pace of the way you're interacting with influencers is the same way your pace should go on how you're ideating product and how it's going to be calendarized. We've had a relationship with Jaclyn Hill that's lasted well over 2 years. There's a great bond there. There's a great relationship to something that was very genuine and true to our brand. But Jaclyn continues to go on and do other things, and we've gone on to do other things. I think if you patch together a meaningful relationship, the move away from one another ends up being organic and feels normal. If you have something that ends with a very harsh breakup or a very harsh disconnect and you move on to someone else and you sort of throw the whole thing away, I think the consumer is going to recognize that as, well, that was really just sort of like a brand spokesperson thing, and you changed the model that you were talking with, sort of like what we did back in the 80s and 90s. So I think the idea of how you move away gets solved by how you create the relationship and treat it along the way.
Fascinating, right? Isn't it so interesting? Like, I'm imagining he was probably holding his tongue quite a bit here, but just really, really interesting. So let's move forward from there. Becca's relationship with Jaclyn is over, and they need to figure out how they're going to move on, but then they got themselves in another controversy.
That's just life, that's just how we pay the price.
I woke up today feeling like royalty.
Y'all, this was such a dumb mistake. It was such a dumb mistake that could have easily been avoided. And for a company like Becca, this was the worst case scenario because it betrayed the very core audience of people that they were trying to capture, people of color. So they were launching their Skin Love Weightless Blur Foundation, and they put up this picture. See if you can spot what's wrong with this picture. There's a bit too much monochromatic going on. Here are some pictures of other brands doing similar kinds of swatches. Why are the palms of the people's hands the same color as their arm? And people took it so far as to call this blackface. People were absolutely outraged. So 2 days later, Becca Cosmetics put out a statement. They put out this photo with the caption, "Thanks to everyone who shared feedback on our recent arm swatch image. We hear you and want you to know that we remain committed to continually representing our inclusive Becca beauties. To demonstrate this commitment, we've reshot with real girls from the Becca office." But people responding to this did not see this as good enough. They felt like it wasn't enough to address the issue, and also just that it shouldn't have happened in the first place. 2 months later, according to Robert DeBaker's LinkedIn page, he left the company. And by 2019, Estee Lauder filed something called impairment charges for their underperforming companies. This included Becca, Too Faced, and Smashbox. I can only imagine how difficult this was for the people that worked at Becca at the time. Like, how do we fix this? We are in so much of a hole. Like, there's got to be a way to fix it. And they tried, and they struggled. One of the things they tried was releasing something called Pop Goes the Glow Champagne Pop Face and Eye Palette in September of 2019. And I found a review of this by Kathleen Lights. And in this review, Kathleen is basically like, what are you all doing?
Zoomed you guys in because I'm going to be trying out the face products first. Does anybody else find it really weird that they kept the name Champagne Pop? We are all very much familiar with the Becca highlight in Champagne Pop. This was their collaboration with Jaclyn Hill a couple years ago, and I think it was like their biggest launch ever. Everyone went crazy over this highlight. It was so popular. It really was that biatch. Everybody had it, everybody wanted it, and I believe there was an issue with Becca. I don't really know the story, I just know what I've seen online, and you can't really judge what's going on based off of what you see online, but I believe something happened, I don't know, where Jaclyn and Becca stopped working with each other, and they continued the Champagne Pop highlight, which is always the case with brands. Like, if tomorrow ColourPop is like, bad biatch, we don't want to work with you anymore, they can absolutely sell Aquarius, Taurus, Lumiere, and all of that just on their own. Like, it will no longer be part of me, but I feel like that's weird. I understand them keeping the highlight 1000%, but I feel like they should have changed the name. I don't know, Maybe it's because I'm also a YouTuber and I'm trying to put myself in that position. But the fact that they did an entire champagne pop collection, am I the only one that finds that a little weird? That's like if ColourPop drops me tomorrow and they come out with a whole Lumiere collection. That's weird.
Elle that I showed you earlier also brought this up in her video, and she made it sound like during this time period, other influencers just stopped mentioning Becca. Like it was kind of the influencers that were friends with Jaclyn saw this as a slight against her, and that was kind of the end of influencers mentioning Becca at all because they were taking their friend's side. And in that, what had built them to this multi-million dollar company that was bought by Estee Lauder, they lost all of that. In January of 2020, they got one last celebrity to try to promote their brand, and it was Barbie Ferreira. And they had her promote through the Own Your Light campaign, promoting their Light Shifter Brightening Concealer. But then, poor Becca, this is terrible. But then in May of 2020, they had to recall the concealer because people were finding mold in it.
Makeup company Becca Cosmetics is recalling a number of concealer products after mold was found in the sponge tip applicator. The FDA says all shades of Becca's Light Shifter Brightening Concealer are part of the recall. The mold can cause temporary irritation, but so far there are no reports of that happening. Anyone who bought the concealer should return them to the store for a refund.
And May of 2020 was not the year to have any kind of health concerns within your product. The final launch that I remember from Becca launched in July of 2020, and it was the Zero No Pigment Foundation, which was, we all thought it was a big joke. It was weird. It was real weird. Here's a clip from my video.
What are you? What are you? What are you? Hello, my friend. I have a very strange review for you today of a very strange product that I'm not even really sure what's happening with it. This is the Becca Zero No Pigment Foundation.
What's up, guys? I'm Elijah. And I'm Yvonne, and this is Becca's new Zero No Pigment Virtual Foundation.
With Zero, skin is amped up, not covered up.
This foundation has zero pigment, so it gives your skin a smoothed out, blurred out, virtually invisible finish. It's totally matte and totally transparent.
I mean, you can't see it. Plus, it's a skincare hybrid. So hydrating, with a gel-like texture, it's like a splash of water on your face.
And it not only hydrates all day, it controls oil all day too.
Which means you get this fresh, natural look if you're not into that whole full face foundation thing, or if you just want to take a break from traditional foundations.
Zero No Pigment Virtual Foundation. Zero pigment, zero to hide.
Okay, so the first thing I feel is it does feel cold on my skin. Okay, and I'm just gonna rub it in. It feels like a gel-based lotion is what it feels like. It does not feel silicone-y. It still feels cold. It feels very wet. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit on my forehead. See what we can do with these wrinkles. It's on. It still feels very wet. I want to stress that. It's wet. I don't know if that's a bad thing. So let's go ahead and look real close and see if you can see a difference. New makeup and skincare hybrid. Makeup? I don't know what makeup is supposed to change the way your face looks in one way or another, right?
Not really. Skincare, got some great humectants, but where are the occlusives? I am really concerned about this possibly not having anything to seal the moisture into my face. So I am definitely gonna be putting a moisturizer on over top of this, or just washing this off completely after this, because I personally don't trust it to not pull water out from the lower layers of my skin. Again, there could be something I'm missing, but I don't see this as skincare. Smooths and blurs the appearance of skin. I did not personally see that, at least enough to justify the price that anybody else would notice. I don't know, maybe zoomed out you can see it blurred a little more. Not really. I really wanted to, but I don't see it. I don't see it. Hydrating all day is a huge concern for me. We just talked about that. Transparent matte finish. My face is not matte. It's not. I don't even have oily skin. Like, my face is not matte. It's just not. It's not. That's sad. That's really sad. Like, you had one job. We have multiple jobs and you couldn't do any of them. What I am gonna do with this is I'm going to use this as a foundation primer over the next few weeks, but I wanna test out things it doesn't claim to do, like make your makeup last longer. I wanna try that, see if maybe that is a thing. My girl Angie Bergs did a great breakdown from a chemist perspective of this product, and what she called this was the emperor's new clothes in makeup. And that was what she described it without owning it, just by looking at the ingredients. And I hate to say it, I think she was probably right. You see what I'm saying? It was not looking good. Becca was about to go out of business.
Never bring me down. Y'all will never bring me down. I feel like a king right now. I feel like a king right now.
Going back to that fabulous article from 2017 with Cheryl Wishover, Robert DeBaker was quoted as saying, "I think you're dead in the water if you're not paying attention to what's happening in the world and the way the consumer's relating to your brand." February 26th, 2021, Estee Lauder announced that they were closing Becca Cosmetics, and they closed officially in September of 2021. The brand's closure was part of Estee Lauder's post-COVID business acceleration program, which included shutting down underperforming retail locations, counters in travel retail and Latin America, and other initiatives. All Becca employees formally lost their jobs. Some of them were rehired by other Estee Lauder companies, but the impression given was that most people just lost their jobs completely. A spokeswoman for Estee Lauder companies told WWD at the time, after a careful and thorough review, ELC has made the decision to shut down Becca Cosmetics by the end of September 2021 due to a combination of macro forces compounded by the global effects of COVID-19. The brand could not sustain success for the long term. Makeup sales for Estee Lauder were down 62% in quarter 2 of 2021, forcing them to cut 2,000 jobs across their company globally. This part is fascinating to me because this is how all the behind the controversies start overlapping. Right, almost the exact same day. It was within the weeks of this happening, of the closing of Becca, Estee Lauder companies acquired Deciem, The Ordinary. They already own part of Deciem, but now they were inking a deal to acquire the rest of it. Under the terms of the deal, Estee Lauder paid $1 billion to increase its ownership position to 76%, valuing the company at $2.2 billion. And this was an extremely smart move on Estee Lauder's part. In 2020, Deciem nearly doubled their sales to about $460 million, most of that coming specifically from The Ordinary and how they had just launched at Sephora. But this is the thing. Even though Becca as a company was flailing and doing really bad, they had hero products that they did not want to let go, including the highlighters and the under eye corrector. Those were the star products. So instead of letting those go when they closed Becca, they moved those individual products over to Smashbox, and they became Smashbox Loves Becca products. And that is where they continue to live today. They are still available. So what has happened since then? Well, Robert DeBaker, who left Becca, ended up becoming CEO of Luxury Brand Partners. Ironically enough, the company that had originally bought Becca. He left luxury brand partners in September of 2022, and in 2023, he became the COO of the magnesium-focused skincare company Nakery Beauty and continues in that role today. They actually just launched at Ulta Beauty online in August and in stores in October. Steven Chapera continued to be involved in all different kinds of ventures within the beauty space, including hair care brand London Labs and incubator Invisible Brands. Unfortunately, he did pass away after complications after a surgery on October 17th of 2024. Rebecca has completely left the beauty space and now she makes ballet wear. She started her company called Bottle in February of 2021 after 2 years of development. The brand website says the Bottle concept draws on founder Rebecca Morris-Williams' lifelong involvement with ballet and her incredible success with Becca Cosmetics, acquired by Estee Lauder in 2016. It serves professional ballet dancers, elite students in training, and recreational dancers worldwide. Jaclyn Hill, of course, is still around and creating content. She launched her own highlighter with Jaclyn Cosmetics back in 2019, and it became known as one of the best products that Jaclyn Cosmetics ever created. Jaclyn Cosmetics closed in January of 2024 after their parent company Forma Brands decided not to continue the company as they went through their bankruptcy. Instead of investing in Jaclyn Cosmetics, they put all of their investment into Jaclyn Cosmetics' sister company, Morphe. Yes, Forma Brands owned both Morphe and Jaclyn Cosmetics. Again, that is a whole nother story for another day. And Morphe seems to be doing very well. They've refreshed their branding, they've refreshed their product offering, and they seem to be trying to slowly build back with less huge influencer influence and focusing more on smaller and mid-sized creators. The occasional big influencer here and there, but mostly smaller creators. I want to offer some final thoughts on this because this has been more of a retelling of the story, but I really want to interject my opinion at this point. And I would love to know what you think, whether you agree or disagree. I feel like with Becca, of course, I've kind of interjected a little bit of opinion in that I think that they, of course, relied too heavily on Jaclyn and their relationship with her in order to grow the brand. Yes, it must have been amazing and they had this tremendous growth, but when they had that separation from Jaclyn, I think that that was the beginning of the end for them, which is really, really sad because I know their products are so well loved. I actually asked you all about a month ago a couple of questions. The first thing I wanted to know was, when did you first use a highlighter product? Not a highlighter technique, but a product. And the vast majority of you, 83%, said that you started using a highlighter product after 2015, which is right in the middle of all of this. Beyond that, 58% of you said you wore your first highlighter between 2015 and 2018. Same. Then I asked you a second question. I wanted to know, what highlighter did you remember as being your first favorite highlighter? And there were over 600 comments. The poll had over 8,000 responses, but there were 600 comments, 620 some comments underneath. And would you be surprised to know that the most mentioned highlighter of all the highlighters in those comments was Becca's Champagne Pop? This was followed by Wet n Wild, MAC, and Benefit. Just the words Champagne Pop were mentioned more times than Anastasia Beverly Hills as an entire brand. In here lies what I think is the core problem of why Becca couldn't survive. Highlighters are something that isn't repurchased very often, along with eyeshadow palettes and things like that. What brands really need to do as their bread and butter is to bring forward a complexion product that can be repurchased over and over again. Complexion, lip glosses, eyeliners, mascaras, things that people need to replenish. A highlighter, it's going to take a while. And having a highlighter be the star product without having other products take its place also being stars was really a bad thing for Becca. Also, the glowy highlight went out of fashion in 2020, really and truly. I mean, people still use highlighters, and of course, people can use whatever they want, and you can still glow to the gods if you want to, 100%. But as far as the masses doing that trend, that Instagram look, the Nikki Tutorials, Jaclyn Hill look from back then, it's just not as popular. So they really needed to transition over to complexion products being their hero products. Then they had that debacle with the shade range on the palms of the hands. But it really, it's like, what are you doing? That was huge. I think that was a big deal for them because that could have been a repurchased product for them. So really the only product they still had that could do well was that under eye corrector. And that under eye corrector supposedly still does excellent because remember, it's being sold through Smashbox and it's still extremely loved. According to a woman named Michelle Shigmasa, hopefully I did okay with that, SVP and Global General Manager of Smashbox, the under eye brightening corrector has consistently ranked in Smashbox's top 10 best-selling stock keeping units since it entered the brand's stable, or its group of products. Another one of Smashbox's top products, would you guess? Becca's Champagne Pop. They're also continuing to sell Moonstone, Chocolate Geode, Opal, and Rose Quartz. Unfortunately, no Prosecco Pop. But that doesn't mean that Becca is back overall, even under the Smashbox name. It's been reported by Euromonitor that the combined sales of Becca and Smashbox and Too Faced, all three brands together at this point, are less than 5% of Estee Lauder's overall sales. But strategically, would this be the time to potentially bring Becca Cosmetics back? I think yes. I think that they should kill Smashbox and they should bring Becca back. I think this is the perfect time for a Becca relaunch. Hear me out. We've got the under eye corrector. We've got the beautiful highlighter just for a little bit of subtle glow. We can also launch those beautiful natural complexion products that are so popular right now. And if you've been watching my makeup news show, What's Up in Makeup, we are about to have a turn, in my opinion, from the very natural, no makeup look to something with a little bit more color, a little bit more zhuzh, a little bit more personality. And I think this is the perfect time for a Becca relaunch. Estee Lauder, are you listening to me? Probably not, but a girl can hope. That, my friend, was Behind the Controversy, Becca Cosmetics. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts about this topic down in the comment section down below. What do you think of the story? What do you think of the drama? What do you think of where they are now? Do you think that Becca Cosmetics should relaunch? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Mad love to you, and I will see you in a video very, very soon.